This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my old pal Evan Grant. We are out here in a lovely surprise for spring training. It's been a lot of fun out here. It's just been one laugh ride after another, hasn't it, Evan? Since I came back out here with you on last Thursday. It's Tuesday morning as we're taping this now. We just had.
It feels like so much longer, Kevin.
Does it? Like it feels like a month?
Years.
It feels like a term, doesn't it?
It's been great having you out here. I never really got to spend time with my grandpa. So taking you all around, helping you find your credential when it's lost, and when you leave your wallet at the restaurant.
Yeah. Let's see what else. I almost left my water on top of the car. You brought that to me. That was a good thing. I'm just always ready to go. You know,
I know you are a man of action.
Yeah, I'm a man of action. That's what I'm going to tell the lovely wife when she says, "Why can't you keep up with your stuff?" I'm going to say, "Because I'm a man of action." That's why.
A man of action. Or as my father used to tell my mother, he was a man of iron will. And when he said that, I just laughed.
I like it. Well, we're out here, reporting on the Rangers. The Cowboys have done a few things here with the opening of free agency. They traded for a defensive end, Rashawn Gary, from the Packers. This was the defensive end that that everybody thought would be freed up now and be a lot better in Green Bay once with the acquisition of Micah Parsons. And he kind of did do that. He got, 7.5 sacks in his first 8 games or so, first half of the season. And then after Micah got hurt, he wasn't so good. But he's better than anybody they had. They gave up a 4th-round pick for him next year. So he's a little expensive too. There might have been better options that they could have worked into their budget, but for what they wanted to spend, this was a decent pickup. They didn't get Max Crosby, of course, and that was too bad. But 2 first-round picks might have been a little steep for a guy at his age as well, since they keep saying they want to keep these draft picks. And then they signed a safety, Jalen Thompson, from the Cardinals, and he's been very solid safety, very good. So, Evan, what that tells me, by trading for a defensive end and signing a safety, there's no linebacker in there. That doesn't mean they won't go out and sign one, but by the time this podcast airs, they may have signed a linebacker by then. But it makes it feel like that might be one of the positions they target in the first round with the 12th or 20th pick if they keep both of those. So we'll keep watching that situation and see how that bears out, and we'll talk about that in next week's podcast probably. But for now,
as I said, Kevin, right?
What's that? What did you say?
I predicted that the Cowboys will find a way to trade for Mansour Delane to be able to pick him, and then they'll take C.J. Allen, and that will solve all their issues.
Wow. Okay. All right. We'll see if that happens.
C.J. Allen will go into the linebacker spot. Delane will handle the safety situation. That'll be great.
Cornerback situation.
Cornerback. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Okay. Well, let's talk about the Rangers. Since we've been out here, or since I've been out here anyway, it's got to see a few games. It's been good. Got to see Bruce Bochy while I was here and sat down and talked with him for a little while. That was fun. Good to see him again. We also have gotten to see some pretty good play from young guys, or certainly inexperienced guys, and that's always the best part of spring training, right? Is who's the young star of camp. And so I guess I'm going to ask you that now, and I'm thinking you're probably going to lean towards somebody you're writing a story about. But who would you put in that position, Evan? The
young star of camp.
The guy that's made the biggest impression, has a chance to do something here.
Listen, I think, it's funny when you're talking about a guy who's been up for 3 years. I'm going to pick a guy you're going to write about. I think Evan Carter's having a really, really strong spring. And yesterday when we were talking to Skip Schumacher and you were asking some questions related to Carter, you mentioned it, and he does look stronger. He does look bigger. He is hitting the ball much harder than last year when he really just wasn't in position to help this team coming out of camp. But Skip even said, that right now, even though Carter, I think, is 0 for 5 against lefties this spring, that he is leaning towards the idea that both Evan Carter and Josh Smith would not be labeled as platoon players. Now, they'll get some off days against left-handers. When you're going to give left-handers off days, you're going to probably try and give them against a left-hander if they're healthy. But that these guys would get the opportunity to face lefties and that they would be everyday players. And so I think, if you go from last year to this year and what the potential for a player is, Evan Carter kind of takes that. He's been outstanding.
Yeah, the thing about when the first column I wrote when I came out here was about Skip talking about I want to get Jake Berger back to what I want to get Jock Peterson back to what he was. I want to get he just kept talking about getting guys back to who they were or what they had done in the past, and there's about 4 or 5 candidates for that. And you're not going to get all of those that way. You may not get any of them that way. But I would say, and this is what I'm writing in the column, is that of those 5, the one who stands to bring the Rangers the most value, if he does get back to that, is Carter, simply because of all the things he can do. Because he's a good outfielder, he's a good athlete, he's the fastest guy on the team. And they want to be faster. They want to be, they were good at stealing bases last year, but they weren't good at going from first to third. And he had the other day he had a grand slam on his first at bat, and then on a later at bat he bloops the ball into left field and then beats it out for a double. And that's the kind of thing he can give you, and they just don't have a lot of that. White Langford is that thing, right? And he's the other one, and so. I think it's really invaluable on a team like this. It doesn't have a lot of great athletes on it. That probably one of their 2 best gets back to what everybody thought he was going to be after he came up and made such a splash in 2023 and helping them to the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is what young guy has got the ability to help this team the most. And there have been other young guys who've had great camps. Cam Cauley has really kind of taken a big step in terms of performance. Something the Rangers needed from a young player in the minor league system because their minor league system is a little bit thin right now. Aaron Zavala, who was a 2nd-round pick in 21, had a really good camp before being sent out, but he's 25 or 26. He's going to have to go prove it at AAA still. There have been some young pitchers. Gavin Collier has had a very nice camp. He potentially could win a spot in the bullpen, though I think it's going to be hard to carry like a 1-inning type guy with no experience. Peyton Gray is, I don't know if you'd consider him young. He's 30. He's never pitched in the majors though, and he's got the ability to pitch some multiple innings out of the bullpen.
That's it. Let's talk about him a little bit because that's who I was nudging toward when we started the podcast. I thought that's who you were going to bring up because you are writing a story about him. He's a really interesting story. You don't have to tell the whole thing now if you don't want to, but that was the first time I saw him pitch was Monday, and I really liked him. He looked good. He was really spotting his pitches very well, and you can kind of recite all the stats for him and what he's been so impressive about this spring. But the big thing he brings is a great changeup. So he's an interesting pitcher here. This is the kind of thing you have to have, right? Unless you're going out and signing, big name people, you're going to have to be surprised by somebody. And this is the camp that maybe he's that guy, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I think the Rangers feel like the fastball, which is right around 92, 93. I think they'd like to see it have one more tick to it probably, but the changeup everybody in camp and everybody who's faced him, thinks it's a big league changeup, and he's not afraid to throw it in any situation. He's not afraid to double up with it. In fact, last week when he came in against Kansas City, he threw 6 straight changeups with runners on base and got out of the inning with a pair of strikeouts. So he's got a big league pitch that would allow him to be competitive in the bullpen. I don't know how it'll be when he's facing big league hitters time in and time out. And I think that's the thing that the Rangers are going to look for over the final 10 days. Yesterday, and listen, I'm going to take a step back here for a second. I think one issue with this camp where you could potentially fall for a little bit of fool's gold is that when the Rangers are playing at home in general, I think veterans, when they can take an off day, prefer not to drive all the way out to Surprise, because it is, at one end of the Arizona spectrum, the A's being at the other. And I think the second thing is, look, the Rangers played Seattle the other day. There was no Julio Rodriguez. There was no Cal Raleigh. There was no Fernando Tatis against San Diego yesterday. There's a real dearth of some top players because they're all playing in the WBC. So it might be you might get a little bit fooled. But I think that what the Rangers are going to want to do over the final 10 days is get Gray in a little bit earlier in games and get him to face some established big league hitters, because they really want to get a better look at him. Yesterday they did that earlier in the game with the Rule 5 pick Carter Baumler, and he had an inning and 2/3, I think, scoreless. I'm sorry, Baumler allowed an unearned run. There was an error behind him by Ezekiel Duran, but he's pitched well. So to this point, there have been some young guys in the bullpen who have performed really well, and there are some jobs open because there are some veterans who haven't performed all that well. Alexis Diaz has probably lost his opportunity in the bullpen. So there's a couple of jobs open, and the Rangers have real competition over the final 10 days with some guys who have put themselves. All you can do at this point in time is put yourself in position to win a job, and these guys have.
Let's talk a little bit about Jacob Latz. And, he was a guy that has pitched really well for the Rangers in spot starts. And going into spring training, I was thinking, I know what the deal was, that he and Kamara Rocker were competing for the last spot in the rotation. And the feeling was that they would probably put Latz into the bullpen because of his versatility in that role, and that's something they could really use there, and that Rocker would give every chance to start. I don't know that Rocker has done anything to win it, but I got to say I have kind of flipped now a little bit on it just after watching Jacob the other day, and when you and I talked to him after the game. I don't know. He's going to have to prove that he can go deeper into games, right? I mean, that's been the issue with him, and until he's able to do that, maybe and the Rangers are certainly probably better served with him coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the other day in the 4th inning, and it was the first time he's gone into the 4th this spring, and it's the middle of spring, and that's typically the time that pitchers get the quote-unquote dead arm. There was some drop-off on the fastball, and he acknowledged that. And there's going to be some drop-off, but I think the drop-off went from 94 to 91. I think the Rangers would like it to be a little bit more gradual, and that is the number one concern about him as a starter, is can he hold the velocity and everything and his delivery deep into games as he starts to fatigue a little bit. And I don't think that we'll get a real definitive answer on that until the last 2 starts of spring, when he's going 5 or 6. The Rangers are going to monitor the rest of major leagues and see if there is a starter out there that they feel like would be a viable alternative. Maybe a guy who's on a non-roster contract who's not going to make a team. Patrick Corbin is still out there as a free agent. I don't know if the Rangers have even $1 million or $1.5 million to go sign him. But I do think the Rangers feel like if they can get through April, they think Cody Bradford ready to step into the rotation. And so that would allow them to then move Latz into the bullpen. And if you look at what Latz's real strong suit is, I don't want to say real strong suit, but you look at the unique skills he'd bring to a bullpen where he could go 2 or 3 innings, where he could piggyback behind a guy like Evaldi or um, Jack Leiter, and you'd go right, left with that, to get you through 7 innings early in the season. That's all attractive. So they may be looking for a guy who could potentially hold that fifth spot for 5 or 6 starts until they get to May, when they hope that they have Bradford back, and that would allow them to really use. I think Jake Latz can be a solid starter, a solid number 5 starter. I think he can be a wipeout weapon in the middle to latter stages of a bullpen. Um, and so that's what the Rangers have to weigh: is what's more valuable, potentially 5 innings of a start one time through a turn of the rotation, or maybe two plus inning outings twice through a turn of the rotation.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan to me. If you're on a budget like they are, I mean, obviously the best thing would be to go out and get the starter you wanted, right? Because neither one of those guys are the best option, neither Rocker nor Latz probably at this point. But they don't have that so far. I think the idea we get here is that if the Rangers are in good shape and that they're competitive at the trade deadline, that Ray Davis is going to, say when Chris Young goes to him and says, "Hey, we need to go out and get a couple of things here." I think probably Ray would do that. My guess is, I don't know. But then the flip side of that is, if they're not competitive at that point, well, then it's a fire sale, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really think the interesting thing is going to be, like, if the Rangers are just kind of hanging around like they've been the last 2 years, what do they do? Do they pull the plug, or do they go all in? They certainly need. I think they need better direction from the performance on the field this year to give the front office a more clear mandate. But yes, if they don't play well in the first half, I really do see this club trying to accelerate a rebuild by trading off some pretty valuable pieces, if possible. When I say if possible, look, Jacob deGrom has a complete no trade clause. Corey Seager has a limited no trade clause. But I think they would try and deal these kinds of guys um, if they felt like they could get good packages, and there's some good players to be had for talent of that level. I mean, if you put a healthy Jacob deGrom on the market in July for a team that wants to take down the Dodgers, wow, what could you potentially get from that?
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. Of course, that's a worst case scenario. No one really wants to see that. We want to see the Rangers making a run at it this year. I don't. Let me ask you this: at this point, last spring, and spring is a liar, right? You can't uh, put too much into it. I was talking to Chris Young yesterday, and I told him, when I write my column at the end of the year, in which I set myself on fire and say that this is all the stupid things I wrote this year. And I have a confession here. It's not all the stupid things I wrote. It would be too long to do that. So I kind of, edit that down a little bit. Most of them are about the Rangers. Most of it comes from early spring when I'm talking about the Rangers and what could possibly happen. It is not like I'm saying, oh, there's no way they can win. It's because I get intoxicated by spring and what's going on here and what could possibly happen. So, how would you compare the Rangers this spring to where they were at this time last spring? Do you recall what that was and your feelings about the team going in then? Are they any different? Do you feel any different about the Rangers now than you did last spring?
I do feel like there's a little bit of a jolt of energy, which is typical when you bring a new manager in. And that, again, is not any kind of shot at Bruce Bochy or anything. But as you kind of indicated, he was the right guy at the right time when the Rangers hired him. And the same can be true that Skip Schumacher is the right guy at the right time now. So I think that, look, there's this era of good feelings here. Um, I do feel like, it was a little bit disconcerting last year that Carter was having such a poor spring because I thought he was going to be the starting center fielder, and it ended up that he didn't make the big league team. Um, in retrospect, the Rangers had a lot of concerns about their offense in spring. I think they feel better about the approaches this year and the messaging. Um, you know, Jack Peterson hasn't had great numbers this spring, but he looks better. Um, we mentioned Carter. Josh Smith is doing everything he
You
needs
left
to
out Jake
do.
Berger.
I do feel like
Jake
all in
Berger
all,
is hitting the ball much
it's a
better,
good camp.
much
What's
better.
that?
I would say
Jake
just
Berger
from
looks much better.
looking at him at the plate
Um,
and without even looking at the
you know,
numbers, I would say that next to Carter, I think he's having the best spring. It just feels like the ball's really jumping off his bat. He's got a home run to right field. He's got a home run to left field. He looks to me much better than he did last. Yes,
for the objectives that spring can provide, or for the objectives you're trying to get in spring, he's hammering balls in the zone. He's taking some walks. He's being a little bit more disciplined at the plate, and he's hitting. I think he's got 6 or 7 balls already at 100 miles an hour or higher. Um, so yeah, Berger was probably the poster boy for their undisciplined approach last year, and I think some of it was Jake just trying to prove that he was worth what the Rangers desire to add him. I think he's in a better place mentally this year, but I also do feel like you can see you can get a better visual of what the Rangers saw in him. He's not chasing as much, and he really is. I cited a stat the other day. I think last year on pitches in the zone, in the strike zone, he slugged like 474 or 492, which is a little bit above league average. I think league average is 474. They didn't get him to be a guy who was a little bit above league average on pitches in the zone. They got him to be a guy who absolutely hammers mistakes. And in 2024, the slugging percentage on those numbers that he had was 581. So that was a huge drop off. And this spring, the last 2 homers that I've seen were pitches in the zone at the top of the zone where he should hammer balls. And then he caught a slider that was a mistake and absolutely drove it, out of the park. So I do think that Jake has had a really good spring in that regard. I guess I hate to use injury as a disappointment, but the fact that Josh Jung has been out for 10 days now, and he's a guy who's got a lot to prove this year, that's been a little bit of a disappointment on the offensive side. He should be back. I guess this podcast will go live on Wednesday. He should be back, I think, on Thursday, and that would be the time the Rangers
yeah.
finally
Go
can
over the
unveil
lineup
their full starting
and
lineup.
as we were talking to Skip on Monday, what the lineup probably will look like, at least the top half of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the top 4 is pretty much set, and it's going to go Nimmo, who's a left-handed hitter, Wyatt Langford, who's a right-handed hitter, Seager, a lefty, and then Berger, a righty. And Skip Schumacher talked about wanting that balance in the top half of the lineup. And the one thing that's at least semi-interesting there is Seager has taken a great preponderance of his at-bats in the number 2 spot. And over the course of 162 games, the number 2 spot gets 20 to 30 more plate appearances, which can be valuable if you're trying to win on the margins. but I think it's outweighed by the idea that the Rangers would get real value out of the balance in the lineup and the fact that, the slug would potentially outweigh the value of some of those at bats, because the hope is that Seager will be with a more accomplished leadoff hitter, and with Langford in the number 2 spot, that he'd be hitting more often with runners on base when he can optimize the value of those at bats. So it makes sense to me. I think everything was going to hinge on who ended up hitting leadoff, and when the Rangers looked at their options, I think the options were uh, heavily left-handed. Nemo, Josh Smith, Evan Carter. I'm sure there was some consideration of, does Wyatt Langford profile to hit in the leadoff spot, but I think this balance gives them the best opportunity. I think the one thing that's going to be interesting, Kevin, on the rest of the construction of the lineup is, where do they hit Carter? Because if they hit Carter ninth, now you are looking at lefty lefty, and maybe three lefties out of a four batter mix, that would make it a little bit easier late in games
Yeah,
for
they're going to have to be
teams to go
concerned
to a
too
left-hander
about,
reliever if
because
they
of his
have one.
speed. You can't bat him behind Jock, so they're going to have to find a place for him where he's not going to get stopped by the guy in front of him. Give me an idea what you think of Nemo. He has not played a lot this spring, because that's his normal schedule in the spring to do that. He did have a triple on Monday, and showed off his wheels a little bit there, and that was good. I will say this: he looks like the bionic man out there, because he's got every square inch of his body covered by something when he's playing. I had not noticed that when he played for the Mets, but boy, he wears a lot of armor and a lot of clothing out there. Well, I
I'm
mentioned it to
not
Jeff
checking
Wilson, and
his
he said the
fashion
same
sense
thing. And then,
out
of
there,
course,
Kevin.
because you're not very observant, uh, I have to talk to other people about that kind of stuff.
Yes, I know, and I appreciate you doing that, because
Yeah,
it gives me a little bit of relief. Listen. I think that the thing that stood out about Nemo and the few at bats that we've seen so far this spring is the disciplined approach at the plate. The triple on Tuesday or Monday was his first hit of the spring. I think it came in his third game. Uh, but the approach is very disciplined, and he's had several walks already. I was I was I don't know if I'd say happy, but it's encouraging to see the guy go, home to third on that ball yesterday. Um, just to see the effort and the ability to do it. I do think that, their leadoff situation was bad last year. I think their on base percentage in the leadoff spot was in the bottom five. So if he is on par with his career numbers, the Rangers are going to have a lot more runners on base early in games, and that's going to make Wyatt Langford
yeah,
and
no
Corey
question about
Seager
that. Well,
and Jake Berger
there's
much more
candidates.
dangerous
If,
hitters.
Nemo doesn't get off to a great start, I'm sure they're going to give him every opportunity to do that, because he was their big acquisition. So they're not going to pull the plug on him very quickly. But at some point, if Carter's playing well, I could certainly see him bat leadoff too. Couldn't you?
Sure, there's other people who would be potential options. You just mentioned Evan Carter. I'll mention Josh Smith as well. But I think that the first I don't want to say the first choice, because I think it's been decided, but I think that
Yeah.
Brandon Nimmo gets
All right,
every
let's talk a little bit
opportunity
about the
to hold the
ABS.
position.
I wrote a column about that. It's already run. I've talked to a few players, and of course to Skip Schumacher about it, um, and talked to the president as well. Uh, yeah, there you go.
I like to call it the automated
I'm all
BS
for it.
system.
I'll just say that right up front. And there are still some things they got to work out, and one of the things that CY brought up to me was that in discussions is that uh, when they measured each one of these players, they just measured their height, right? They didn't measure them in their batting stance, and so it's fine with a guy like Cody Bellinger who's straight up, but a Juan Soto who's got a big crouch that actually changes what his strike zone should be. So that is probably the one issue everybody talks about is that on this ABS system, the side to side is locked, right? Because that's just the plate, and so you get that is very accurate. The top and bottom is a little bit of an issue so far, and they've worked with that some. But when I talked to Nate Eovaldi about it, I think he had a little more trepidation about it, but I expect that from a veteran pitcher. It's just something new, and they've been, he's been around a long time, been a very successful pitcher. When I talked to Jake Latz about it, he did it in AAA a couple of years ago, as did Josh Smith. I talked to both of them, and they talked about the improvements in it since then. And basically, and I love what Latz said was that, hey, I want balls to be called balls and strikes to be called strikes. I'm not trying to get calls off the plate, all that kind of stuff. Let's just get it right. And of course that's my viewpoint of the whole thing as well. Let's just get these calls right. It's very painless. A guy, somebody wants a call, they tap their helmet or tap the top of their head, they turn around, make an announcement, flashes up on the screen immediately, and then boom, here we go. It's 6-8 seconds tops, and so far, Skip said what we've seen is that wow, the umpires have been really good because this is not that far off. Except when you look at the numbers according to Baseball Savant, in which with the bases loaded on challenges by either the pitcher or the catcher, who are the only other two people who can make a challenge, they're winning those challenges like 63% of the time so far. Now, I know this is a small sample size, but 63% of the time they're winning in that situation. And what's a bigger situation than the bases loaded if it's a ball or strike that you're challenging?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the ABS system and how teams handle it is going to be an ongoing thing all year. Skip has talked about the strategy of when a team wants to use it. Um, and look, I mean, I think that what you're seeing with some bases loaded situations uh, are that those are one of the situations where you're more aggressive and challenging, and so you have more challenges there, right? You have a higher percentage of balls that you're willing to challenge, and I think if anything, that's beyond just pure coincidence. That might lead to why there's so many wins there. There's other situations, a 1-1 count. I'm sorry, a 2-1 count or an 0-1 count with nobody on base. You're just not going to challenge those. So there's not a lot of data at all there, and there's not a lot of data in general. But I hear what you're saying, and listen, I think the system by and large works. Um, it is pretty seamless in how it goes. I don't think it adds any significance to the length of games, and if it takes out the silliness of arguments at home plate, that would be good. So I'm completely cool with the ABS system. I do think that one thing veteran pitchers, especially guys like Evaldi, who uses so many different pitches and has so much movement, they are the guys who would like to be able to get a pitch that is a half inch or an inch off the plate on the corners, and so
Probably
they
so.
they probably are the
Yeah, I
kinds of
get
guys
that.
who
Now,
are
let
going
me
to
ask
have
you
more
this
pushback.
before we get out of here, because Skip brought up the human element, and that's what you always hear in all of this. And of course, I've always just like chafed at that type of thing. Is that I no one comes to the game to see the umpires, right? And so, to me, the umpires are there just to keep things in order here, right? And I'm not against umpires, but and Skip even, and that was the thing that's surprising to me is the number of people who expressed like, oh, this is going to be really hard for umpires because it kind of shows them up a little bit. Skip even talked about what's it going to be like at the end of a game when there's a play and the bases are loaded and there's two outs and there's one of these. How will that end? Well, I mean, it's a dramatic moment now, right? if an umpire makes a call or it's a strike or it's a ball strike, whatever it is,
Yes.
that's a dramatic moment. I like knowing that, hey, we're going to get this right now.
And listen, I mean, the one thing I would say about that is you get 2 challenges during a game, and most teams are going
Well, you
to
get 2
want to hold a
unsuccessful
challenge
challenges.
for
Let's
the
say
ninth
that,
inning if it's a
right?
close game.
2 unsuccessful
And so
challenges, right?
what's that?
Yes, right.
You get 2 challenges. If you make a successful challenge, you retain your challenge. But I'm saying, we're seeing teams basically be 50% or a little bit above 50% on these challenges as a whole. And so they're not going to use a lot of challenges early. They're going to try and save at least one challenge for the ninth inning. And listen, if a game ends on a 3-2 walk or a game ends on a 3-2 strikeout, on a close pitch, and there's some evidence behind it, I think it'll be fine. I think ultimately it'll be fine. There won't be any arguing. There won't be any hard feelings. It'll be decision made. The one thing I do want to mention before we end this whole thing is I thought one thing that was interesting is, with any new rule, everybody's going to try and exploit it. We've already seen the Milwaukee Brewers, because they're trying to give their hitters a better sense of when to challenge and when not to challenge. The Brewers tried putting up red and green index cards on the dugout railing to indicate, hey, this is a good situation, a good count, or a good opportunity to challenge if you feel like you need to. A red card would obviously say this is not, and Major League Baseball got back to them and said, no, these are supposed to be unaided by the dugout in any way, shape, or form. So you can't have that up there, even though they're going up before the pitch. I do think this is a little bit silly because I think that ultimately the dugout can send in signals to the third base coach, who then gives an indicator with maybe his hands on his hips or one hand on his hip or something about what the situation is. So I get Major League Baseball's intent here, but I do think that that's what teams are going to do, is find ways
And
to
that's not a big deal
give
either.
their
I mean,
hitters
you're just
more
telling the guy, look,
education
this is
and
an
information.
opportunity here if you want to make it. If teams are doing that, so what? It's not a big deal. I just like the idea that we're going to get this right from now on. And I won't miss arguments. All that kind of stuff did just lengthen the games, right? And supposedly everything is supposed to be about keeping the games moving, and this keeps the game moving. And when you watch these things, when these calls are made, these guys just turn around and walk to the dugout. They're not yelling at anybody, because who are they going to yell at, right? So I think it's all good. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We concentrated on the Rangers, and we'll be back to a multi variety. That's redundant, I guess. Multi variety, maybe a variety pack. We would just say that for our next week's podcast. And when I'll be back, and Evan will still be in Surprise, but I'll be back in Dallas. So everybody just take some solace in that. So from everyone here to everyone out there, we'll see you next time.